I'm not going to get into my preferences. I think DeSantis or Haley both would be great candidates against Trump. The DeSantis people have a lot of reason to believe that if he got out of the race, his support would go to Trump. If Haley got out of the race, her support would come to him. But here is the reality. Donald Trump is ahead of both of them significantly, but Nikki Haley in New Hampshire is closing in on Trump. And I suspect if Christie were to leave the race and endorse Haley, if he really wants to stop Trump, most of his support, in fact, the undercurrents of polling suggests the greater proportion of his would, so much so that she'd come very close to Trump in New Hampshire. And then it becomes a turnout game and what else happens in the dynamics. The reality, though, is that to win the election, you have to win the primary. And while all of the polling shows Nikki Haley is best situated to win an election against Joe Biden, she outperforms him in pretty much every poll taken by greater margins than anyone else. Haley isn't necessarily the best fit in a Republican primary as constituted right now, and she has to find a way through that. In New Hampshire, she certainly is. There is a scenario that I think actually helps Haley more than DeSantis, but it is a path that requires every piece of it to align perfectly. And that path begins in Iowa, where if Ron DeSantis beats Donald Trump in Iowa, it signals Trump is not inevitable. DeSantis then has to springboard into New Hampshire, and I think it's too far of a reach for him to win New Hampshire. But if Chris Christie drops out and throws his support to Haley, that DeSantis signaling Trump is not inevitable in Iowa probably actually helps Haley in New Hampshire. And then they go to South Carolina, where if you get Tim Scott to align with Nikki Haley and consolidate that base, you've had Iowa where Trump doesn't win, in New Hampshire where Trump doesn't win. It gives Haley an advantage in South Carolina. I mean, that's kind of the irony as I see this right now, that I do think if DeSantis drops out, it pushes his support to Trump. But if DeSantis wins in Iowa and shows that Trump is not inevitable, I think that changes the dynamic. Ironically, though, I think it probably helps Haley more than DeSantis. Your mileage may vary on that. Feel free to disagree. I absolutely know the DeSantis people will. But when I look at the polling here, whoever wins Iowa typically doesn't become the nominee. Cruz, Huckabee, Santorum. Whoever wins New Hampshire has a better likelihood of it. But, I mean, keep in mind the McCain win in 2000, and all roads therefore lead to South Carolina. You've got a former governor of South Carolina. If she gets the backing of the current senator of South Carolina, who was a nominee, you can consolidate that vote there, possibly helping her. But again, every single thing has to fall perfectly. And I have been around long enough to know that's not going to happen, which continues to give Donald Trump the advantage. Now, I will say, I think Donald Trump can beat Joe Biden. And in fact, the Democrats themselves are deeply worried about Donald Trump beating Joe Biden. Barack Obama is concerned about Donald Trump beating Joe Biden. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Let me pull this up. Those with concerns include former President Barack Obama, who knows this is going to be a close race and feels that Democrats very well could lose the 2024 election, according to a person familiar with his thinking. Obama worries that the alternative is pretty dangerous for democracy, the person said. The fate of the president's priorities could be decided in the coming days. A legislative deal combining foreign aid and immigration changes is the subject of intense bipartisan negotiations in the Senate through the weekend. The package being discussed would provide billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, while tightening the U.S. asylum system, making it easier to deport migrants who are in the country legally. A round of dismal polls is increasing jitters among Democrats, including some in the West Wing, who are worried that voters' negative views on the president are going unchallenged. Those Democrats are growing impatient for a full-fledged campaign to start. Here's the problem. I think most people think the campaign's already started, and they just don't like Joe Biden. His polling continues to degrade even further. The latest polling now has him at 34% popular approval rating, and Donald Trump handily beating him. The Democrats need to see the writing on the wall. At the same time, Republicans, keep in mind that Incumbency gives advantages, and indictments and possible convictions can disrupt things with independent voters. For Donald Trump, it is absolutely true. And every poll shows Nikki Haley beating Joe Biden more handily than anyone else. But every poll also shows Donald Trump beating Joe Biden right now. There are just more wild cards with him than Haley.